Okay, I got 12:03, so I'm going to get us started. Good afternoon and welcome to today's program, Social Security and Retirement. Is it on your horizon? I'm Nick Cunningham, the program manager of LVAIC. We have a great presentation to you led by Richard Gaudiosi from the Social Security Administration. Richard is a public affairs specialist, and he will review some of your Social Security retirement benefits. Before we begin, please be aware that we will be recording today's session. We will stop the recording during our Q&A session to respect everyone's privacy. Feel free to ask questions in the chat throughout, or you can save them for the Q&A at the end. And now I'm going to turn everything over to Richard.
All right, thank you, Nicholas. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're doing well. So we're going to cover, as Nicholas said, we're going to cover Social Security retirement, but we're also going to dip into some other types of benefits as well. It's a lot of information. Do not worry if you need to follow up later on, because between our website, socialsecurity.gov, between our local offices, our phone system, and even me, you can contact me if you have to. I can answer questions. You send me an email. We'll get you straight on anything that you're uncertain about. So we're going to go through. We'll start, Nicholas. We'll go to the next slide. So everyone, these are the topics we're going to cover in this order. We're going to cover your current situation as a worker who's paying the Social Security tax. Then you see the second bullet, taking your benefits with a question mark. That's because that's a question you're going to have to both ask yourself and answer yourself. Social Security folks like me, we can give you the regs, we can give you numbers, we can tell you about a lot of things about your potential benefits, but ultimately it's your money. You have to decide when you're going to take it, and there's a lot of thought that should go into that. But ultimately, it's your money. As I said, you've done the work, you know your situation best, so you will know when to take your benefits. You will figure it out. And then if you want to work and while you're receiving Social Security, the rules there are a big factor in when people decide to retire. I mean, who wouldn't want to have an extra check coming in? But if you're working and making a certain amount of money based on your age, you may not be able to collect just yet. So we'll talk about that. And then we're going to talk about your family, but in a nice way. We're going to talk about spouses and ex-spouses and maybe children as well. And then the last piece is on Medicare. So we're going to go in this order. So we'll go next slide. So folks, currently as a worker, you're paying the Social Security tax. It's commonly called the payroll tax. Technically, it's the FICA tax, which is the Federal Insurance Contribution Act tax. However you want to call it, you'll see it on your pay stub as Social Security or RSDI or another designation, but you're having 6.2% of your gross earnings taken out for Social Security. You're capped on earnings for the calendar year of $184,500. So if someone makes more than 184.5, they no longer pay Social Security tax. But up until that point, you pay 6.2%. You also pay a Medicare tax of 1.45%, but that is on all your earnings. There's no cap on that. So a lot of times people will say, I pay 7.65% towards Social Security, but technically this is how it breaks out. 6.2 is Social Security, 145 is Medicare. The percentages are not scheduled to change anytime soon. They've been that way for a number of years, and it would take an act of Congress to change them. The earnings cap does go up every year, generally around $5,000 or $6,000. It's based on national wage levels. A person is insured for Social Security or vested for benefits, whatever you want to say, if you've been working and paying the Social Security tax for 10 years. If you've done that, then it means you will be eligible for a retirement benefit when you reach that age. However, you're going to see as we go through that, you got to work a lot more than 10 years, and you have to make some good money to get a good Social Security benefit. Okay. So we go back to the big question again, folks. When are you going to take your benefits? Now, you might have a date in mind, or you might know for certain what you want to do, but who knows? After you hear this presentation today, you might rethink some things. But basically, it comes down to a choice. Choice one, are you willing to wait longer to get your Social Security in order to get a higher amount each month the rest of your life? So you put it off for the time being and you wait in order to get the pot of gold later on. Or do you go the other way and say, no, 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 I've been working a long time. I want to get something out of this system. I want to collect sooner. And to collect sooner, I'm willing to take less money each month. So that's kind of the rub with Social Security, and not only for retirement, but other types of benefits as well. The sooner you take a benefit, the lower it's going to be dollar-wise and percentage-wise, but of course, you're going to have money in your pocket sooner. The longer you wait to get a benefit, it's going to be higher money-wise each month, and percentage is going to be higher each month, but you're waiting to get your money. So you're trying to predict the future in a lot of ways here about things that may or may not happen to you in order to make this decision about when to collect. We'll talk about that too. Okay. If you are of a mind to wait to get more, to get the higher amount, then in order for you to receive what we call your unreduced benefit or your full benefit or your 100% benefit, however you want to term it, you must wait until you reach your particular full retirement age to collect. Full retirement age, what we commonly call FRA. FRA used to be 65 for everybody throughout the country under Social Security, but that has not been the case now for over 20 years. FRA today is determined by your year of birth. So your FRA could vary very much so with your next door neighbor or someone else within your family. We're going to show you the chart. Okay. If you are of a mind to say, I don't want to wait that long, I want to start before I hit my full age, then 62 is the absolute earliest age a person can collect their own retirement. Starting early, however, meaning before you hit your full age, that's going to reduce your percentage. You're not going to get the 100% benefit you would get by waiting. So that percentage can range anywhere from like 70% for people who start right at 62 to as much as 99.5% if they start the month before they reach their full age. So you have to think of this as sort of a diagonal line where each month you delay, you pick up about 0.5% each month. So what you would get at 63 in 6 months is going to be 0.5% higher if you started at 63 in 5 months, and so on. Big consideration here is your work plans. Again, we're going to show you that a little bit later. But again, how old are you? Are you going to keep working? How long are you going to work? And how much money do you make? That's going to be a factor. Okay. This is the this is the retirement age chart. So on the left-hand column, reading down, that's easy. That's the year of birth. The middle column now reading across is the full retirement age for that particular year of birth on the left. And that's the age at which if you wait until then to start your benefits, you will get 100%. And on the right-hand side, we've already mentioned that the earliest you can start is 62. So the right-hand side has the percentage you would get for a particular year of birth if you start at 62. So you see the first group there, people born 43 to 54, about half of that group are baby boomers, and they have 66 as a full age, and they would get 100% at 66. If they start at 62, they would get 75%. And then you can see going down the line, I highlighted the last group, anybody born 1960 and later. So these would be folks who are 66 and younger. Their full age is 67, and they would get 70% at 62. So you can see where this chart is going. People in prior years, like our parents, other folks who went on Social Security some years ago, they got certain amounts at younger ages and they got higher percentages. Now, because people are living a lot longer, Social Security was adjusted some years ago. So now people wait longer to get benefits that people in the past got at younger ages. But people live a lot longer today as well. Okay. So let's do an example here how this shakes out. So we have somebody who's born in 1964. So they're turning 62 this year. So that's the earliest age they could start their social. And for the purposes of this example, we're going to say this person's due $2,500 at their full age. So if they start at 62, we just saw that someone born 1960 or later, they would get 70% of their full benefit if they start at 62. So 70% of 2,500 is 1,750. So this person who's starting 5 years early is getting Social Security immediately at 62, but they're getting $750 less than what they would have gotten had they waited 5 more years to their full age. But they have money in their pocket all that time. If this person would start at 67, it's easy. It's just a flat 2,500. They get the full 100%. Okay, next one. But what if you don't want to take it even at your full age? Well, if you want to delay past your FRA, you're going to eventually end up with more than 100% of a benefit. So if you don't take it until after you reach until after full retirement age, you're going to get an 8% yearly bump up in your Social Security benefit. This is called receiving delayed retirement credit. Okay. And this increase, however, stops at age 70. So unless there's some taxation reason why a person would not take their benefits immediately by the time they reach 70, there really is no reason not to, okay? Because you're not getting any more of a percentage bump up. As far as your family is concerned, this increase would only be passed along to a surviving spouse. So for instance, suppose you're married, you wait till 70, you get a bump up in your overall benefit. You have a spouse who's going to file on your record. While you are alive, your spouse's benefit will be computed based on your regular age FRA age benefit. Okay, would not be based on your bumped up amount. If you later pass away, then your widow or widower would have their benefit recomputed now on your bumped up amount. So today, if we talk about this 8% increase, we're talking about basically your own benefit here today. Okay. All right. So just to close this loop on this chart, 62 gets 70% of the 2,500 at 1,750. 67, right at their full age, easy to get the 2,500. If they would delay 3 years in this case, 8% bump up per year, that's a 24% increase over the 2,500. This person would start with $3,100 at the age of 70. Now you see there from the top line to the bottom, from 62 to 70, that's 8 years. Person number one at the top, by the time they reach 70, would have gotten 96 checks. So they would have 96 checks times whatever their benefit amount is, 1,750. But the person at the bottom now comes along and they're going to get $3,100, which is $1,350 more than first person got to start. But of course, they left a lot of money on the table, so you generally have to live into your early 80s to recoup that money. So what you're trying to do here, folks, let's face it, you're trying to predict the future as best you can. Are you healthy? How long are you going to live? All those types of things come into play. Sometimes people have to take their Social Security early because they're in a financial situation where they need the money. So a lot of this depends on your individual circumstances. And by the way, I say you get an 8% bump up from 67 up to 70 in this case. You do not have to wait a full year. It's the same principle as your own retirement. If you waited a half a year, you get a 4% increase. If you waited a year and a half, you get a 12% increase. You get percentages based on each month, each individual month you delay past your full age up to 70. Okay.
Richard, for some reason it's not advancing. Give me a second. I'm trying to work out what's happening.
Yeah. Okay.
There we
There
go.
you go. There you go. You're fine. Okay, so the benefit computation, a lot of times people ask us that, how do we compute their particular benefit? Well, the first thing we do for everybody is your earnings are indexed or increased, whatever you want to say, based on national wage levels. So whatever you made basically from age 22 on, there's an adjustment made in what you actually made and what you will get credit for. So for instance, let's say 20 years ago, you might get credit for 1.5 times what you actually made once we index those earnings, which is a good thing for you. We're trying to keep up with national wage levels. Once we do the indexing for all your years of work from age 22 on, we take your 35 highest years, and those are used in your computation. So remember at the outset, we said that you have to work 10 years to get a check, and that is true. But if a person only worked 10 years and stopped, they would have 25 zero years going into this computation. And that's going to hurt them dramatically because ultimately we're working with a pot of money here. Okay. So if a person worked 30 years, let's say, yes, they're going to have 5 0 years. But if those 30 years were high earnings years or good earnings years, then that's not going to hurt them that much. Someone who works 40 years, we're going to drop out your 5 lowest. So keep that in mind. The longer you work, the more money you make, the higher your benefit is in fact going to be. Okay. Now, a lot of you, I'm sure, over the years, you've gotten a Social Security statement mailed to you. This is a list of all your earnings and estimates of your benefits, things like that. It used to be that we sent it every year to everybody who was 25 and older. But in recent years, we only send it to people who are age 60 or older and who are not yet on Social Security. Okay. Unless you created an online account as well, even if you're not on Social Security, if you create an online account, you will not get one of these statements in the mail. So we'll go next slide. What we have basically in place of that for most people today is what's called a My Social Security online account. I'm sure a lot of you have already created one of those. Okay. But it's a financial planning tool. It's going to give you all your earnings year by year. You're going to see everything, see if everything looks correct. It's going to give you estimates of your benefits at key ages like 62, your full age 70. It's going to tell you what your family members could receive if you pass away. It's going to tell you what you could get if you go on disability. And a lot of times this My Social Security account, it's promoted to people who are not yet on benefits, but it's also something good for people who are already on receiving benefits. So maybe your parents, let's say, would create one. But what that would allow them to do, if they ever want to make any changes to their record, they can change their address online. They can change their direct deposit information. They need a Medicare card. They can request one. They don't have to call us up or go to an office. So it's a good thing both for people pre-Social Security and folks who are already on. Okay. As I said, probably a lot of you folks have already created one, but if you need to do so, right on our website, you can go on and you'll see it right up front, create a personal My Social Security account, and it'll lead you to doing that, okay? And again, as I mentioned, you're going to see your benefit estimates at different ages. Your full age 70, if you're in your early 60s or whatever, it's going to give you a benefit like at 62 or 63, whatever age you are. And it's a really good thing to have because you want to make certain all the information we have on record for you is correct, particularly if your earnings year by year. You want to make certain there wasn't any mess ups with the employer or with IRS or us. And you want to make certain that if you have a 0 year showing and you know you worked, you want to get with us and we can generally fix that. Okay. All right. So again, back to that big question, when are you going to take your benefits? So the red line says, ultimately, it's personal. I mentioned this before. It's your money. You did the work. You know your family situation. You know your finances. You know what you want to do. It's going to be your call. But like any good financial guy would tell you, there's a bunch of factors you need to consider. One is longevity of your family. Do you have a family that's long-lived? Are you healthy? You feel good? You think you're going to be around for a while? If you are, then you may in fact put off taking your Social Security because you're going to be here. Other folks who for various reasons do not have such a good long-range outlook, they may decide to take their benefits early because they want to get something out of the system. Taxation. Sometimes when you get your Social Security, when you get it, you pay tax on it, depending upon that and your other types of income. So your accountant might tell you, well, Mr. Jones, if you take your Social Security now in the last couple of months of the year, you've been working, you have some other investments, it's going to mean you're going to pay more in taxes on your Social. So he might tell you to look to next year when you're not going to be working. That's something you'll have to figure out. Family benefits now and in the future. Are you a single person where everything falls on you? Are you part of a married couple where maybe one person's going to take benefits, the other's going to keep working? Are there any children under 18? Because children can only generally be due benefits up to 18. So let's say you have a 16-year-old child and you're thinking of taking your retirement, but then again, you're thinking of putting it off. If you delay past another 2 years or so, that child is now 18, and once they turn 18, they can't be, they're not entitled to any benefits once they reach 18. So sometimes somebody might say, well, I'll look at it as a total package of income and I'll file now. Also, too, sometimes one person might be the higher earner of the two in a married situation, and maybe they want to provide for their spouse thinking down the road if they pass away. So sometimes one person will keep working to provide a higher benefit for the person, the other part of the partnership, and they will do it for that reason, to make certain they have a higher Social Security benefit should they pass away. And then on the right-hand side, they kind of go hand in hand, finances and lifestyle. What do you want to do? Some people want to travel and they feel like I want to travel while I'm still physically able. Maybe if I get a little older, I'm not certain how much of that I could do. Some people say I have to keep working because of Social Security and other income is not enough. So I need to do as much as I can. Everything kind of goes back to the red line. It's your call, but we can help you, but ultimately you have to make that decision. Okay. All right, so let's say you're ready to file for benefits. There's basically two ways you can file an application. First off, we generally tell people to start the process about 8 weeks or so, 6 to 8 weeks before you want your first check. That's for a couple of reasons. One, sometimes you have to wait for an opening slot for an appointment because a lot of people are retiring every day all across the country. But you're usually good 6 to 8 weeks if you start with make a contact with us. You can file online at our website, ssa.gov, and you would access your retirement application using the online account. So even though the online account is technically a voluntary thing for you to do to My Social Security, we as an agency are moving more and more to have people have to have the account. They want to do certain things online. So if you want to file online, you would go through your account. If you want to file by phone, that's the other option. Then you would call us up at our toll-free number, and we would set you up with an appointment. We would say, 10 o'clock on this Tuesday morning, we're going to call you, and we're going to do it over the phone. So it's either pretty much over the phone or online. We've kind of gotten away the last number of weeks from doing in-person office interviews, and that's for a couple of different reasons. But primarily now it's either online or on the phone. Okay. Here's one I think you'll like. When will you be paid? You will be paid on a Wednesday. That'll be your check day. So it's tied to the day of the month that you're born. So anybody born the 1st to the 10th, they're going to get their Social Security on the second Wednesday every month. Anybody born 11 to 20, it'll be the third Wednesday. And anybody born 21 to 31, we tell these people, blame your parents. They're the ones that are making you wait for this. Should have thought of this a long time ago. But you will be paid on the fourth Wednesday of the month. And one thing to keep in mind, Social Security benefits for a particular month are paid the following month. So the benefit that a person receives in their bank account in April represents payment for the month of March. A lot of people say these checks are late or they're 1 month behind. They're not. The law states that a person must live the entire month in order to be due a benefit. So in theory, the only way we know you live the entire month of March is to wait and pay you in April. So sometimes that causes confusion for people, but you want to start your benefits with the month you turn 70. You're not going to get a check in the month you turn 70. You'll get it the next month. Okay. So now we're going to talk about working while receiving. As I said, this will be a big factor in when people decide to retire. Okay. Retire and collect the check, I mean. If you want to collect and work, if you have not yet reached your full age, then benefits will be withheld if your earnings exceed a certain amount of money. So basically what the government is saying here is, okay, you want to collect retirement benefits, but you're not quite fully retired. So we may or may not be able to pay you, okay? Or maybe we have to adjust what we pay you. Starting with your full age month, there is no earnings limits. So, let's say a person reaches their full age at 67, March of a particular year. As of March, they want to collect their Social Security and keep working. They can make $1 bazillion. It doesn't matter. But from age 62 until the month before you hit your full age, you have an earnings limit to be aware of if you want to work and collect. If you don't want to collect just yet, then there's no issue here. Okay. All right. If you are going to take your benefits before your full age, there's 2 yearly work limits which could come into play. It depends upon your age. The first limit covers several years, from age 62 up until January of your full age year. So this is 62, 63, 64, 65, maybe even into 66 for some folks. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then we have the second limit, which applies only in a limited number of months, those months being in your full age year, and only if you want to collect prior to reaching your full age month. So let's say you turn your full age in June, this would cover January through May, because if you reach June, you can earn as much as you want, or if you don't want to take your benefits until you hit June, doesn't matter at all. So we'll go to the next one. We'll go over both of these. The first limit, again, working anytime from 62 up until your full age year. In 2026, the yearly earnings limit is $24,480. It's not very much money. If that limit is exceeded and you're in the early retirement years, the withholding rate is $1 for every $2 you go over the limit. So the example at the bottom, somebody earns $44,480. They're allowed to make $24,480. So that means they're $20,000 over the limit. Half of $20,000 is $10,000. The withholding is $1 for every 2. So they would lose $10,000 in this scenario. That's a lot of money to lose. So probably this person would say, you know what, Social Security, I'll come back either next year, or maybe if I drop my earnings down, I'll come back and we'll redo this computation again. But depending upon how much is going to be withheld, that's a big factor in whether you want to take your benefits or not. Now, if this person is going to lose, let's say, $2,000, they might go ahead and do it. Depends on how many months in the first year here they're initially going to be eligible. So again, this is a math game here, but that's the way that's going to work. And that earnings limit goes up, not a whole lot. I would expect next year is probably going to be around $25,000 even. Goes up generally about $500, $600 each year. Okay. As you get a little older, the scenario brightens considerably for you, because the limit in your full retirement year is a lot different. This year, the limit in their full age year is $65,160 for months before reaching your full age month. So the example I would mention before, someone becomes full age in June and they're working, do they want to collect prior to June? This limit applies from January through May. So in this case, 5 months to earn $65,000, that's a pretty good salary. That would be like $13,000 a month. Okay. If the limit is exceeded and the person wants to collect before the month of June here, the withholding is 1 for 3, which is also better for you than it is in the earlier scenario where it was 1 for 2. So depending upon when your birthday falls and when you reach your full age, if you reach your full age in February and you're working, you only have to worry about 1 month, January. If you reach your full age in December, you got to worry about 11 months. So it sort of depends upon your particular situation too. That's another factor. When are you reaching your full age? What point in the year are you doing that? Okay. There's one other rule which is available to you, which is a good rule to have available. It's called the alternative monthly rule. You can only use this once in your Social Security lifetime. But instead of us looking at how much you're going to earn for the entire year, just like we've been doing in the example, we look how much you're earning month by month. And people sometimes use this rule the first year they retire. And we're going to show you why in a second. But what are the monthly limits? They're nothing more than taking the yearly limits and dividing them by 12. So prior to the full age year, that 24,000 limit becomes $2,040 a month. That 65,000 in the full age year becomes 5,430 a month. Okay. So the next slide will show you what we're talking about. So this is an example that we have a guy who's 63 years old. He's going to work from January through October. That's 10 months. Going to make $8,000 a month. His total earnings, therefore, are $80,000. But he's not going to work the rest of the year, the last 2 months. Now, remember, folks, this is the monthly calculation. But if we were in the yearly calculation where he had a limit of 24,000 and change, he's well over that. He wouldn't be able to get paid anything under the yearly calculation. But this is the monthly. So we'll go next slide. So under the monthly calculation, even though he earned 80,000 in the first 10 months, we're going to ignore that. And we're going to say to him, how much are you going to earn in November? He's going to say nothing. How much are you going to earn in December? He's going to say nothing. Therefore, he can get full benefits because he's under the monthly earnings limit, which is $2,040. So even though he made 80, which, like we said, is a good figure, we can discount that and just start paying him November and December. And the reason I say people use this rule the first year of the retire, because think about it, people retire at different points of the year. You might have a teacher who retires in May or June, make good money for the first 5-6 months of the year, but maybe they're not going to work the rest of the year. Someone might retire around Halloween or Thanksgiving time. They're not going to work the last month or two, which is kind of what we're looking at here. Even though they made good earnings all the way through up until that point, they could conceivably get full checks. Now, if this person who's 63, if next year he turns around and makes 80,000 again or 100,000, he's completely off the monthly calculation. He's under the yearly calculation now, and that's going to change things dramatically. So, again, you use the monthly rule if it's to your advantage, if it can give you a higher amount of benefits. Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk about family benefits, primarily spouses and surviving spouses, widows and widowers. All these benefits are gender neutral. Whatever applies to a man applies to a woman and vice versa. Okay. So first we're going to talk about a current marriage situation for a life case. And the life case is referring to the fact that the worker on whose record this benefit is going to be based is alive and well. So we're talking about two people who are alive here, okay? So minimum age for the spouse filing on the husband or wife's record is 62, same as it is for retirement. You can be younger if you're caring for an entitled child of the worker who's under 16 or even a disabled adult child, okay? So, for instance, just to give you an example, suppose you had a married couple, they're both 40 years old, and the man gets in an accident and he goes on disability. Now, normally the 40-year-old spouse, she cannot collect any benefits because she's not yet 62. However, if they have a 10-year-old daughter, let's say, that changes the whole scenario because that's a child in care. So even though the spouse is younger than 62, she can collect the benefit and the child can collect the benefit. But in the absence of any children, the spouse would not be able to collect at this point. In a life case, you have to have been married 1 year to the person. If you're married for less than that, then you have to be the parent of the worker's child. So you have to have some relationship / dependency going on here. Okay. Divorced people in a life case where your ex is alive and well, and you're happy about that. Minimum age here is 62 if no child in care, same as we just saw. In a divorce case, you must have been married at least 10 years before you got the divorce. Not 9.5 or 9. It has to be 10 years from marriage date to divorce decree. If you haven't made it to 10 years and you get divorced, you will never get any benefits on that person's record. And you, in a life case, meaning the worker is alive, you have to be currently unmarried if you're filing on their record. Okay? All right. How much do people get in a life case? We're going to talk about widows and widowers in a second, but we're talking still about life cases. What benefit do they get? Well, the first thing you must be aware of is that if you have worked in your own right and you have 10 years of work under Social Security and you come to us to file as a spouse and try to get benefits on your husband or wife's record, you must first file for your own retirement. Okay, you can't put that off. You have to take it. It used to be some years ago, you could put it off and just take spousal benefits. That's not the case anymore. If you have 10 years of work, you have to take your own. Your age when you start receiving as a spouse determines the percentage. This is the same situation as the way the percentage is determined on your own retirement. What age are you when you start? And the percentage range of the worker's full benefit, you see at the bottom there, a spouse filing at 62 can get 32.5 to 35% of their husband or wife's full benefit. A spouse who waits to their full age can get 50% of their spouse's full benefit. So in other words, if your spouse's full benefit is $3,000 and you're filing at your full age, the most you could get would be $1,500 as a spouse. But now keep in mind the first bullet, you have to first file for your own retirement. If your own retirement beats what you can get as a spouse in a life case, you will not receive anything as a spouse. So in this scenario I'm giving you, spouse at the very bottom, the spouse at full age can get 50%. Let's say husband's benefit is $3,000 full benefit. That means that spouse could get $1,500. However, since they filed for their own retirement first and their own retirement benefit is $1,600, they will not get anything at this point in time as a spouse. So the numbers are, a factor too. Okay. We're going to talk widows and widowers now. One difference in that type of category of benefits is that minimum age for a widow or widower is 60, not 62, but 60. And same thing, you can be younger than 60 if you're caring for an entitled child of the worker who's under 16 or disabled. Duration of marriage we saw in a life case was 12 months. In a death case, it's 9 months, or if it's less than that, you have to be the parent of the worker's child. As a widow or widower, you have to either be single, or if you did remarry, you did it at age 60 or later. So, what I like to tell people is if you're 59 and a half and you found love a second time, and you want to get married, you shouldn't really get married at 59 and a half because you should put that wedding off 6 months till you turn 60. Then you can file on the first person's record and still marry. Okay. But if you marry before 60, that sort of puts everything on hold. Okay. How much does a widow or widower get? Well, again, it depends on the age they are when they file, but they can receive anywhere from 71.5% at age 60 to 100% of the deceased full benefit based on the age when they're starting benefits. So again, it's that sort of diagonal line, in this case, starting from age 60 and working its way up. If the deceased took early retirement, okay, so they took their own retirement early before they passed away, then the benefit is adjusted somewhat here for their surviving spouse, but it's not that much of a hit. Okay, all right. One last thing about widows and widowers, which is a good rule they have available to them. It differs from the spouse rule in a life case. We just saw that in a life case, if you have 10 years of work, you must take your own retirement first. Widows and widowers are not bound by that rule. They are not required to take their own retirement first when filing for survivor benefits. So the example here is Mary becomes a widow at age 63. She can say, I don't want my own retirement now, just give me survivor's benefits. And then the reason Mary does that is because her own benefit is continuing to grow percentage-wise because she hasn't touched it. She can collect at 63 as a widow, and then later on, she can switch to her own retirement, and she could have 124% on her own benefit at that point if she waits till 70. Now, keep in mind one thing here, a lot of young widows and widowers, they often are still working because, they need to work to survive economically. So the earnings test that those figures we talked about, the 24,000 or the 65, they do come into play if somebody's working. However, if you are a widow or widower, and let's say you're working, and your work precludes you from getting 12 months worth of checks, but maybe you get 6 checks or 7 checks and the others are withheld. Well, you might do that because it doesn't affect your own percentage on retirement when you take it at some point later on, and you have some extra money coming in. So depends upon what you want to do here, okay, and how the numbers shake out for you. Okay. All right, now we're going to talk about Medicare. And this is a graphic of the Medicare card. The only reason I put this up here is because you see under John Smith's name, there's a combination of letters and numbers underneath, IE, G4, whatever. So this is kind of a goofy combination of numbers and letters. What happened here is that it used to be that the Medicare card had the Social Security number of the person on whose record the benefits were based. So it could be your spouse, could be you. And a lot of people are nervous about that because if they lost their card, which they would take to the hospital or a doctor's visit or whatever, they lost their card, someone could get a hold of that and then potential identity theft could happen. So some years ago, Medicare as an agency switched to this identification number that's used for people, but it doesn't, if somebody picked up their card, it doesn't really help them in any way with ID theft because it's not giving them any vital information like the social number. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay. So Medicare, folks, of course, I'm sure you know, is the federal government's health insurance program. It's generally for people 65 or older. It's not tied to the Social Security changing retirement age schedule. It's not tied to that. It's a flat 65. People under 65 can also get Medicare if they either have been on disability for 2 years or they have kidney failure. Okay. But the huge majority of people who get Medicare get it on the basis of being 65 or older. You apply with us at Social Security. We determine if you're eligible, that you have a certain amount of work done, paid the taxes, things like that. Once you're on Medicare, however, then everything switches to another federal agency called the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, commonly called CMS. They handle all kinds of healthcare issues. Why didn't Medicare pay for this wheelchair, or why didn't they pay for this visit, or whatever it might be. And you reach them at 1-800-MEDICARE. So our people at Social Security, we just determine that you're entitled to Medicare, and we take your application. After that, everything goes to CMS. Okay. Under Medicare, there are 4 parts: A, B, C, and D. Part A is and Part A and B have been around since the beginning of Medicare. Part A is your hospital insurance. If you have to stay in a hospital overnight or some type of skilled nursing facility overnight, then as an inpatient, then hospital insurance will kick in. It's premium free if you have 10 years of work. In other words, you do not have to pay any premium when you get it. But if you think back to what we talked about, you paying the Medicare tax, in a sense, you're paying your premium when you're working because you're paying into the Medicare fund with that Medicare tax. Okay. And if you don't have 10 years of work, if your spouse does, you can get Medicare through your spouse. Part B is called medical insurance. This is where you get outpatient services. Let's say you get a test done at your doctor's office or at the hospital. You're not staying overnight. You're getting medical supplies, things like that. That's medical insurance. You do pay a premium for that. This year, $202.90 is what's called the standard premium, meaning that's the minimum what people would pay. If you're a higher income person, you could and would pay more than $202.90. Some people are paying $400 and $500 and $600 a month based on their total income. Okay. All right. Now, most people feel just having Medicare A and B alone is not enough to cover them sufficiently for all the things that can happen medically. So they go out and have some additional add-ons to A and B. And generally, those are Part C and D. Part C is what's called Medicare Advantage. And anymore, CMS doesn't really use Part C as much. They just tend to call it Medicare Advantage, but I'm going to say Part C because that's what it's been. And this is where you have private companies that offer various types of coverage, additional coverage besides the A and B. For example, an HMO, where you're in a network. and usually prescriptions are covered. So maybe you would sign up with Cigna or Blue Cross or Aetna or somebody. You would have A and B, and then you're paying some money for an additional Medicare Advantage plan. But usually that will cover prescriptions. Now, there's also Part D, which is strictly prescription drug coverage. Same principle here. Private companies offer the plans. They've been approved by the federal government. The only thing we at Social Security have in terms of being involved with Part D is that there's a program called Extra Help for people that have limited income and assets. They can get a break on what they pay for prescriptions. They have to apply with us to get that extra help, extra financial help. Okay. Now, I just mentioned that Part C is usually a network, like an HMO. Now, sometimes people don't want to be in a network. So what is their alternative to taking Part C? Well, they can do a two-pronged approach. They can purchase what's called a Medigap policy. These are I think there's like 12 or 13 of these uniform policies available all across the country. They're identified by letters like Medigap policy K, Medigap policy L. And you have to have A and B, and you would get your medical coverage there, but they don't provide prescription coverage. For that, you would have to buy a Part D plan. So it's kind of like the opposite of Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage does have prescription coverage. Medigap does not. So you would buy a Part D plan, okay? And so pretty much, folks, the choices are almost everybody's going to have A and B. And then the question is, do you want to have Medicare Advantage as your additional coverage, or do you want to have a Medigap policy and a Part D plan? Okay? All right. But those last two, the C and D and all those are voluntary. It's up to you. You don't have to get them if you don't want, but you're exposing yourself to potential big expenses if you don't have something. Okay. So now we're going to talk about signing up for Medicare. Before taking Medicare, remember, Part A is premium free in most cases. You have the 10 years of work, or your spouse does, and they cover you. You're not going to have to pay any premium. If you don't have 10 years of coverage, 10 years of Social Security and Medicare tax coverage, then you're going to pay a lot for Part A. Part B has a monthly premium. We just saw that. And what's important here is your work status. That's going to dictate when you take Part B, because Part B is going to cost you money. All right, next slide. So the big thing in deciding when to start your Medicare is the big factor is, are you working or are you not working? So first, we're going to talk about somebody who's coming up on 65. They're not working. If they're receiving Social Security, meaning they took early retirement, like 62, 63, 64, and now they're coming up on 65, we have a record of you. We have a mailing address. You've proven your age when you got your Social Security. So a Medicare card is automatically sent to you 3 months before your 65th birthday month. You don't have to do anything. That's going to come in the mail. Okay? If you're not on, and if you want Medicare, you just sign the card, you keep it, and you're covered as of your 65th birthday month. If you're not on Social Security, so let's say you're not working, but maybe you're going to wait till a later age to get a higher Social Security amount, so you may not be on. In that case, nobody knows you're out there. So it's up to you to file with us in the 3-month period beginning before your 65th birthday month. You actually have a 7-month window to sign up for Medicare B. That's 3 months before you're 65, the month you turn 65, and 3 months after. If you sign up in the first 3 months, then it'll start right on time at your 65th birthday month. If you wait till your birthday month, it's going to start the next month. It's going to kick out 1 month. You can file online at our website, or you can do it by phone with us. Very easy. Okay. That's if you're not working. If you are working, it's a different ballgame. You're allowed to delay filing for Part B if you're covered medically by your employer, or a spouse is working and covering you by the employer. Somebody has to be actively working, because you don't want to pay money to your employer for the medical coverage there and also pay the government for Medicare Part B. Because first of all, the employer coverage is going to be primary. So you may be paying a good bit of money for Medicare B and not even hardly using it. So basically what people will do if they're working and covered by their employer is that they put that off until they stop working. Okay. And once you're about to stop working, you have to submit 2 forms to us at Social Security. They're both single-page forms. They're very simple. One is called a 40B. That's just a form where you fill in remarks. I want my Medicare B to start such and such a date. And the other is something signed by your HR department, L564. All that says is that you've been employed there as an active worker since the month you turned 65 at least. Okay, and they provided medical coverage. You may wish to file for Part A only at 65. So even though you're not going to take B yet because you're still working, you may want to file for Part A. But the only time you wouldn't do that is just take A, is if you're in a health savings account at work, because that causes a problem with the IRS. So in the absence of that, though, you can take Part A only and wait Part B until you stop working. I don't know if folks are out there have HSAs. I think the next slide is our last one. And it might just mention, yeah, okay. So I don't know if anybody has a health savings account, but you can't contribute to a health savings account if you have Medicare. Because they're sort of, you get a tax break with either one, the government doesn't allow you to do both of them at the same time. So just be aware, if you file past age 65 for Medicare initially, Part A is going to be retroactive up to 6 months. So if you come in at age 66 and file for Medicare then, you're automatically taken back 6 months. And if you were in an HSA during that 6-month period, that's going to cause a problem for you with the IRS. So a lot of times folks in HSAs, what they do is they stop contributing to that 6 months before they want to start their first Social Security check. Because along with that first check is going to come 6 months of retroactivity for Part A. You have no choice in the matter. That's what's going to happen. So all I say for folks with HSA is just consult your HR department, and they should be well versed in that. I believe that's our last slide. So if we have any questions, we can take them.
Yeah, as Richard says, we have time for questions, so I'm actually going to stop the recording to respect everyone's privacy and be able to ask their questions a little more freely.
I have a question.